I want to use a made-up illustration, parable, modern day, to, I think, hopefully plant the idea, what we're talking about this morning. So I think you will relate to this very well, especially with what all's been happening in Iowa in the weeks preceding. But I want you to imagine this morning that you were swimming in a river and that you were out a pretty good ways and realized you were getting fatigued and thought that you probably ought to get back, and you start trying to swim back and you realize that it's further than you thought, and the water's moving pretty fast. You're actually drifting downstream now, and you begin to think the thoughts, I don't think I'm going to make it back to that shore. I don't know that I'm going to get out of this river. I don't know if I can get myself out of this river. And you begin to have that panic sense come over you that you're drowning and you're so weak and you're so struggling fighting that water. And you look down and you see that there's a group of people on the shore of the river, and you say, man, some people. If I could get their attention, they could help me get out of the river. And then you think, man, I'm so embarrassed that I got myself in this situation. I hate to bother them and draw attention to myself. If I start screaming and flailing my arms, they're going to think I'm nuts. So probably I'll just drift on by and drown and not bother those people. Does that make any sense to anybody in this room? It doesn't to me. That doesn't make any sense to me. See, here's what I think you would do. If you were out in a river, and if you got fatigued, and if you thought you were not going to get out, and if you saw some people on the bank, you would begin to scream with every ounce of air in your lungs. And if you could lift your arms, you would flail them in the air and try to get their attention, because you would say, that's my only hope. If they do not see me, if they do not hear me, and I get by them, I'm a goner. And you would do everything you could to get the attention of those people on shore for your aid, would you not? I think we all say, well, sure we would. That's my sermon this morning. I would suggest to you this morning that much of the time in our prayer life, we're not desperate before God. We do nothing to gain God's attention. We do not speak to God as though He is our only hope. We speak to God as though He is one possible hope out of many hopes. Just let me tell you right now, I'm not against going to the doctor. I'm not opposed to going to the doctor. We had a good prayer time this morning. I'm not telling you should not go to the doctor, but I am telling you there are people who put a whole lot more trust in doctors than they do in the one who designed and created the human body. There are doctors who say you have a virus. Any of you ever been told you have a virus? You know what that is in medical language? I don't have a clue what's wrong with you. We're going to call it a virus and begin to treat and see if we can figure anything out. See, doctors are good. They're so intelligent, but they're so limited because they don't know us inside out. They've studied and done the best they can, but I'm telling you, there's a God who can speak the word and bring healing into your life. You believe that this morning? I'm telling you, there's a God. And see, when we're desperate, when we're hungry, when we understand that God is our only hope, and if we do not get His attention, now, I think I've made that point. That's my opening. Now I understand. Right now, some of you are sitting in this room saying, I believe if you'll check in the book of Matthew, I think it's chapter 6. I think it's chapter 9, but I'm only going by memory. Look that up and just, I don't know. If it doesn't say something about God knowing what we have need of, don't put it up there. But if it says something like that, or if there's a verse on either side of it, put it up there. I'm going to let Jim find it. Matthew 6:9, I don't know. 6:8. I was off by one, but Jim is good. He found it on the computer. Therefore, don't be like them. Jesus is talking about the people who make big speeches. They pray a lot of words, but they don't believe what they're saying. For your Father, look at what it says, your Father knows what you have need of even before you ask. Now here's the dilemma that I find this morning as I preach this message. There will be some of you who say, if that verse is true, and Pastor, if you're telling me that I've got to get desperate before God, if you're telling me that I've got to get God's attention, if you're telling me that there is a God sitting in heaven who knows what I need before I ask, and yet He tells me to ask, there's something wrong with that God. He ought to just come to my aid anyway. Do you know what the next line is? I think it's something like, therefore, when you pray, pray like this. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. It's the Lord's Prayer. He goes right from saying, God knows what you need, into teaching them how to ask. Now, I find that amazing. So it's not a contradiction. It's not a confusion on the part of God. I'm going to tell you this morning, we need, or God needs to hear from us. God needs to hear from us. And I'm going to tell you something else. I'm going to go ahead and toss it in right here. You need to hear you telling God something. I'm just going to tell you, I believe this with everything in me. There is something about a vocal. Now, there is a time, we call it a holy hush. I haven't seen many, but I've seen a few. I've been in the presence of God at such times that you could not utter a sound if you wanted to. I suppose you could, but you knew you'd break something, so you just stay quiet. There is a time for a holy hush in the presence of God, but I'm talking about today seeking God, and I'm talking about finding the favor of God, and I'm talking about a time of desperation in that. And I'm telling you this morning, God wants to hear from you and I. How many of you, and my mother-in-law is excluded from this contest, how many of you know God's telephone number? If I say raise your hand, it's his cell phone nowadays. Miss Betty's not holding her hand, but she's the one that taught me this many moons ago. I hate to tell you, it was 30-something years ago that I heard my mother-in-law say this, and I liked it. Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. That's God talking in Jeremiah 33:3. That's Jeremiah's. How many of you remember telephone numbers that had a word and then a number and then some more numbers? Old people, raise your hands. Well, I should say, how many of you remember going 1, 2, 1? See, that's really old people, but I won't go there. Thank you for raising your hands that you remember that. Some of you just lived out in the sticks, and I understand that's part of the deal. My telephone number was Greenwood 62952. That was my telephone number. God's telephone number is Jeremiah 3:33. That's his cell phone. Here's the deal. We say, I will answer thee and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. We say, God, show me great and mighty things that I don't know. And God says, you missed part of it. Call unto me. You missed that part. You say, I don't want to call. I just want you to show me great and mighty. I don't want to have to do anything that puts any responsibility on me. I want it to be all about God. And I'm telling you, God doesn't say that. God needs to hear from you. I love the slides. I don't know where Jim gets them all or makes them or whatever, but he puts a slide trying to be nice and say, turn off your cell phone. And I love the slide that comes up and it says, we hope you hear from God today, but it probably won't be on your cell phone. You can turn it off now. See what I'm saying? That's God says, I'm available. I want to hear from you, and He's ready. Now let's go to the book of Psalms, Psalm 27:7. Psalm 27 and verse 7. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy upon me and answer me. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. I looked that word up because there's so many different words translated cry from Hebrew to English. That word does not mean, ooh, Lord,